Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the session about facilitating online learning. My name's Adi Evans. If it is the afternoon, I hope you had a good lunch, and I hope you all enjoyed listening to David and Sarah's opening address at this year's Learning and Development event, Moments of Learning. I've got two colleagues helping me out today, Martin and Shelley. Hi Martin, hi Shelley.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, Adi. Hi, Adi.
Hi Martin. Just so if you're watching this, you're aware, I'm at Headquarters South up in Kidlington, and Martin and Shelley are both at Sulhampstead. So we are doing this as a sort of proper online event. What you've been watching for the first couple of minutes of this online session are the ground rules and reception slides, which provides information to people that are logging on prior to the session getting up and running, and I'll explain the information that's included on these as we go through today's session. The way this session will run is it's based on a session that I wrote about learning styles, and we'll go through that session, and at various points I'll stop and explain what I'm having to do as the facilitator and how I'm ensuring that I'm trying to engage all the learners as we go through this session. It will be interactive, so Martin and Shelley will be taking part following various instructions from me as we go through. Now, the reception slides that are going through are there until the start of the session, and at this point what I need to do now is close those slides down and open up my main slide deck for this morning's training. So I'm hoping what you can see now is the What's Your Learning Style presentation. So Shelley and Martin, can you see that on your screens at the moment?
Yes, I can. Yes, I can.
You can? Good.
I can too.
Fantastic. So we started well. So this is the main part of the session, is a session on What's Your Learning Style, and I've started with a few images there, and a question of what's your learning style, to try and make it visually impactful and engage people in to try and find out or want to find out more. And what I need to do now is advance through each slide one by one, and explain what the slide's about and how it's going to help you as a participant in this online learning. So the first thing I need to do is introduce who I am, and there's my details there, Adi Evans. That's a picture of me on my holiday last year, and my contact details, both email, mobile and telephone, are listed on the bottom of the screen. Now they're there for you to contact me should you have any issues or any questions throughout the session or after the session that you don't want to ask during the session. Now, good practice as the online facilitator would be for me to log on to two terminals if possible, so that if people are emailing me, I can have my email open on a separate terminal so that it doesn't cover the main terminal that I'm working from. My mobile is switched on, but it's on vibrate, so any rings coming in doesn't disturb the session. So my next slide is really preparing you for the session ahead. You may wish to make notes. It's a good idea to have a pen and paper ready to make notes. I would try and avoid using things like Word or Notepad, because you'll be obscuring the actual slide deck if you do that. So pen and paper would be a good idea from here. And then we cover the ground rules. Just like you would do on a normal classroom-based session, you need to set the ground rules and explain to people what is acceptable. So firstly, you need to tell people to limit any potential distractions, and you may have seen this on the reception slides. This is about turning phones to silent, making sure you don't have any background programs on, such as email, Twitter and Facebook. And make sure that, if possible, you put a sign on your door so that people don't disturb you, if that is possible for you. It's always worth mentioning participation. Because you're not in the classroom with people, it's hard to see if people are engaging or not. So you need to make your online sessions as interactive as possible. You need to warn people at this stage that they may be called upon to take part, because not everybody likes to volunteer in these sessions, but as a facilitator you want to make sure that you're engaging everybody. So warn people they may need to take part. But it also includes being proactive. If you've got questions as you go through, you need your participants to be aware that they can raise their hand using the tools or type something in the chat box, which we'll cover a bit later, to get your attention. I'm happy for people to do that as we go through the session at any time. But it's also worth explaining that there will be questions, a time for questions later on in the session. Raising your hand, that will tell me that you want my attention, and I'll show you how to do that a bit later. And questions we've already covered. Further ground rules, patience. If you're waiting for a response, if you've raised your hand, you need to sort of manage your expectations of your participants by telling them that you would have seen that their hand's been raised, because as the facilitator, a message pops up on screen telling me who's raised their hand, but I might not be able to respond straight away. So warn your participants that you will get back to them, they just need to be a little bit patient. And again, because I haven't got that the visual of the participants, I don't know if people have moved away from their desks. So at this point it's worth saying if people are going to move away from their desks, they're going to have to let you know by using one of the icons that they can set next to their name, which I'll show you a bit later on. If your participants have any concerns, again, there's various ways you can contact me or contact the facilitator. We've mentioned the phone and email at the start. You can send private chats, which we'll cover a bit later on, or if it's something that you want to share with the group, you can do that in an open forum. And feedback. If you have any, if your participants have any feedback, you should encourage them to provide it, but ask them if they would consider making their comments sensitive, so as not to offend anybody else that's involved in the session, a bit like the classroom protocol that we use currently. So interacting. Now Martin and Shelley have both used this system before, but it's worth at this point during your session to explain the ways that people can interact with you. So we've mentioned chat, and I'll be getting Martin and Shelley to use all these tools throughout the session. So chat is one way, and you can speak to everybody on chat, or you can select an individual person to speak to on chat. I would encourage you to ask your participants to keep that set to everyone so that everybody can be involved in the conversation. Emoticons, this is how you can tell me how you're feeling, or whether you want me to come to you for your comments, or whether you have a question. And again, we'll be using these throughout the session. And we also have a toolbar which will allow participants to draw over the top of your slide deck, so you can prepare slides where you might want people to enter information, and they can use this toolbar to do that, and you'll see us use that throughout this session today. It's always worth going over audio problems. We do experience audio issues from time to time, and there is an audio setup wizard that can help with this. So at the top of the screen, and I'll just point to it with my pointer. Can't quite get there, but if you see where my pointer is, at the top there is a meeting option. If you select meeting, there is an audio setup wizard, and then there's some on-screen instructions. This will test out your headphones and your microphone, and you can then click finish. It's worth people doing that before they actually contact you for help and advice. So we've gone through the introduction and the ground rules. So just to confirm what we've discussed so far, we have reception slides to give people that join early some pre-information about how they can chat and the ground rules. We've discussed using tools, and you would have given your participants an option to play with the tools at this point so they feel comfortable before the main session starts. And we've mentioned how we can deal with audio issues. So before I go any further, I'm just going to go to Martin and Shelley. Have you any questions?
I don't, thank you.
Okay, happy with how the tools work because you've used them before?
I don't, thank you.
Yeah, I am, yeah.
Fantastic. And you, Martin, same questions?
Yeah, I'm fine. Yeah, I'm fine. Thanks,
Yeah,
Edie.
I am,
Fantastic. Okay, let's move on then. So, getting to know you. Again, like in class, you would do an introductory session. You may have people all over the force come into these sessions. They may just see a name in the right hand attendees box, and it's a good idea here to do an introductory exercise. And for this one, I'm going to ask Shelley and Martin to use the chat function. So could you type in your name, where you are, and your favourite food? Now, as the facilitator, what you would do is keep an eye on the chat box at this point, and I can see that Shelley Franks is typing something, and then when it pops up, it's always good to comment on what people have put in there. So Shelley's at Salhampstead and she likes chocolate as a favourite food. I think I do too, Shelley. And Martin's in his office in Salhampstead and likes anything with fish. That's fantastic. So at this point you're getting people to find out a little bit about each other, but you're also encouraging them to use one of the tools that you would have mentioned in the introduction. Okay, just like you would in class, you would ask if there's any concerns about the session or about using the tools at this stage. So I'm going to use a different tool this time to encourage some interaction. So again, you're getting people to do something, but do something that they haven't already used. And on the next slide, I've included what we would call a whiteboard slide split up into different lanes. So I've got lane 1 to 8, assuming that I'm going to have a maximum of 8 participants. And what I would do here is allocate a lane to each participant and ask them to type in if they have any concerns. So Shelley, if you could have lane 1, and Martin, if you could have lane 2, I'd like you to use the text tool and type in if you have any concerns. If you haven't, please could you say no, you're all happy and raring to go. Now, as the facilitator, when people are using this text tool, I can't actually see anything on my screen to suggest that the text tool is being used. One of the things you may need to remind your participants at this stage is after they've used the text tool to type text in, they need to click away from the text tool box for it to be displayed. So you don't see the typing as it happens, but as you've just seen, it's appeared there. So Shelley, it's a busy office, so might get interrupted or distracted, but she's put a sign up. That's great. Well done, Shelley. And Martin's concerned that if he does anything with the system, it will log him out and everyone else out. Just to put your mind at rest there, Martin, you won't log everybody else out. If you log yourself out, you've got my contact numbers, so you can give me a call. But if you just log in and join the meeting as normal, you should rejoin it as to where we are at the moment. Does that answer your question, Martin? What you could do here, if it does answer your question, use the emoticons and put a green tick. Fantastic, that's great. And Shelley, you're happy too, that's fantastic. If you could both take your green ticks away, and we'll carry on with the session. Lovely, thank you. Okay, so the story so far. We mentioned reception slides, tools and audio issues in the introduction. And now we've talked about the importance of having an introductory exercise to get your participants that could be spread across the force, start them getting to know each other. And we've mentioned it's important to go through a concerns exercise. So moving on to the next part of the session then. The aim of this session is to introduce you to Honey and Mumford's learning styles. So this is where you would normally in class go through the aims and objectives of the lesson and state how they're going to be achieved. Again, you need to have visual aids here. I use photos quite a lot, quite large photos, and I try and keep the text on the slides as a minimum, as you'll see as we go through, and I'll come back and revisit that. So the objectives: by the end of this session you'll be able to name 2 learning style theories, you'll be able to list 4 learning styles, and you'll be able to identify your own learning style. And we'll do this with a series of interactions by using the chat facility, drawing on the slides, and having chats with me one-to-one and as a group. So Martin and Shelley, if you're happy with the plan for today, could you put a green tick next to your name? If you're not happy, please put a cross, and if you want to ask a question, please raise your hand. So we're both happy. Fantastic. If you could clear those ticks down then, please. It's important as the facilitator you remember to either clear the ticks down yourself or ask your participants to, otherwise you won't know what the emoticons they've selected are relating to. So if somebody raises their hand, you deal with their issue but you don't clear their hand, you might think they have another question, which they don't. So keep on top of your emoticons and when they're selected and when they're not. Okay. So moving on then through the presentation. Again, another interactive task for your participants to do. And this is just to establish what people know about, well, not what they know about learning styles, but some of the words that you're going to use throughout the session to get your participants familiar with them. So I've done a word search here, and the words are along the bottom: vac, honey, a Mumford, and andragogy. And what I'd like you to do, Shelley and Martin, is using your pencil tool, do the word search and put a line through the letters as you find them. And when you found them all, could you please raise your hand? Now what is good here, they've selected different colours for their pencils, so I can see the progress of both learners. So we've got pedagogy, honey and Mumford has been struck through twice, vac has been found.
AD, I've got a question.
Yes, go ahead, Shelley.
On the list of words to find,
Yeah, pedagogy
it
isn't there,
says
is it?
andragogy. AD, I've got a question. And Martin's found pedagogy. On the list of words to find,
I can see andragogy as well.
it says
Oh,
andragogy.
so it is there. Yeah, it is there.
And Martin's found
I will go and find it.
Okay. It's not too far from where you've already found another
so
one.
it is
Shelley.
there.
Just as a little clue.
I will go and find it.
Yay! Perfect. Okay. That's excellent. So you've identified some words there, and again that exercise has got a bit of interaction.
Do I get an extra point?
For what? For getting pedagogy? Yeah, you can have an extra point, Martin.
Thank you,
Does that mean you're one up at the moment?
It does. It does.
Okay. Right, Shelley, you need an opportunity to get that point back a bit later. Okay. So, and Shelley's applauding Martin there for the extra point. That's lovely. If you can remember to clear that applause down, thanks, Shelley. And if you're both ready to continue, I see the applause has reappeared, Shelley. That's it, lovely. If you're ready to continue, can you give me a green tick? So Martin's ready and Shelley's ready. That's great. And you clear those ticks down. Now you might be wondering why I'm asking Shelley and Martin to use the emoticons, as there's two of them and I can talk to them. You may have up to 8 people. If you had open mics for up to 8 people, it's very, very difficult to manage from the facilitator's point of view. So when you've got more than 2 people, you would select the mics for people to talk to as and when you wanted to invite them to speak. With 2, we could just use that as the tool to communicate. But obviously this session is about showing you some of the tools and techniques you can use for online facilitation. So moving through the session then, what's your learning style? So this is a question, and I've got loads of pictures of people with their hands raised, and I'm inviting Shelley or Martin to explain to me what their interpretation of a learning style is. So if you'd like to share your view of what a learning style is, please raise your hand, and the first one to raise their hand will get to give their explanation. Don't be shy. So I'm not having any takers. I'm going to give 5 more seconds, and now Shelley has raised their hand. Okay, Shelley, let's have your explanation of what a learning style is.
Okay, so I think it's a preference as to the way you learn something.
Fantastic. I think that's a really good
explanation. Okay, so I think it's a
Thanks, Shelley.
preference as to the way
Martin,
you learn
have you got an explanation you'd
something.
like to add, or are you happy for us to continue?
I think it's your preferred style of learning.
Your preferred style of learning. Okay, thank you very much. I think that's also a good explanation too. So, a definition of learning styles, it describes the behaviour and attitudes which have an impact on the way an individual takes on, processes and learns new information. For the rest of this session, we're going to look at one particular learning style theory, which is that of Honey and Mumford, which appeared in the word search earlier. And it looks at how we learn. So a little bit of history about Honey and Mumford learning styles. It was developed in the late 70s when Alan Mumford and Peter Honey worked together on a consultancy project, and they were tasked with identifying the learning styles of a range of managers within an organisation. They used this information to put together a learning programme that had been designed to suit those particularly identified learning styles of those managers, and it took them around 4 years of trying out different processes before they completed their findings, and they published this in 1982 in a book called The Manual of Learning Styles. And this publication has been a significant, and the impact had in 1982 is still the same today, although now it's used worldwide. However, currently people are starting to look at neuroscience and how the brain works when we're learning new topics. And if you get a chance, Martin, who is online today, is doing a session today on neuroscience. So that's well worth a visit if you can put that into your schedule. So in their findings, Honey and Mumford identified 4 distinct learning styles. And if you know what those 4 distinct learning styles are, Martin and Shelley, please raise your hand. Martin, you were first, so what are those 4 learning styles that they identified?
I believe they are activist,
Yeah.
theorist,
Yes.
pragmatist,
Uh-huh.
and reflector.
Well done, that's good. I think that deserves a round of applause, Shelley. Fantastic, that's great. If you could clear your or Martin's given himself a clap, well done. If you could clear those emoticons down. And we got a smiley face. We're using the full range. Lovely, that's great. So, just as a summary of what we've done so far, those are the things we've already talked about, and we've now gone to look at the need to cover the aims and objectives so people know what they are going to be covering. We've introduced some more tools that people can use as we've gone through that session. We use these to retain the interest and increase participation and the confidence of people in the system, particularly if they're using it for the first time. And we've used several images. Now there are some golden rules when using images on online facilitation. Number 1, make the image fill as much of the screen as possible. A larger image is more eye-catching and engaging than a small image. And ensure that your image relates to the topic of which you're discussing. Don't just use an image because you like the picture. It needs to relate to the topic. Ensure the image is clear and of good definition. You might find a photo that you want to use that's quite small. When you expand it, it might look pixelated, which isn't that good for online facilitation. If you need to get an image that you can't find online or available to you, take your own images and upload them. You can then make them exactly what you want them to be. And one of the issues you need to consider when using images is copyright. Just because the image appears on copyright or on Google Images, for example, it doesn't mean it is copyright free. You may need to check with the owner of that image as to whether you can use it or not. Don't use anything unless you are 100% sure you have the permission to do so. That's why using your own images is often a good alternative. Okay, Shelley and Martin, if you're happy to go on, please put a green tick. If you've got a question, please raise your hand. Well, Martin's put something in chat there. Good point about copyright. Thanks, Martin. And we've got a tick there from both. Fantastic. Okay, so Martin mentioned the 4 different learning styles there, so we're just going to have a summary of these. So activists then, as the title suggests, these are people who like to fully involve themselves in any learning experience that they are involved with. They will thrive on new experiences, and they like to be focused on the here and now, what they're currently involved in, and they're happy to be engrossed in what they're currently doing. They usually approach new ideas and topics with an open mind, and they really do look for the positive aspects of these, and they get very, very enthusiastic about them. Now I'm noticing some chat going on in the chat window about copyright, and Shelley would ask Peter Webster about copyright. Martin's asked who's Peter Webster, and Shelley's put in there he's the Force librarian at Selly. So he is a very good person to speak to about copyright. And Martin's just put in there we're still listening, so that's good. So back to where we were on the slides. Activists are focused on the here and now. They're the type of people, they charge into doing things and will only start to think about the consequences of their actions after the event. If they had a philosophy about how they live their lives, it would probably be, I'll try anything that's given me to do, and they like to be active all of the time. If they have problems to face, they'd prefer to have a brainstorming session rather than sit down and analyse the situation. They like the excitement of new experiences, and as soon as they've had one experience and that excitement's died down, they'll look for the next one. Taking part in activities in any environment is something that they love to do, and they can quickly become the focus of all activities, especially if they are surrounded with people of other learning styles. They like to take the lead. So that, in a summary, is your activist. And Martin said, I've just described him, and having worked with Martin for the last 2 years, I can confirm Martin is an activist. And we'll just wait to see what Shelley's typing before we move on. And Martin's emoticon would be the speed up one. Yeah. Okay, so an example I'd like you to think of now, other than yourself, Martin, can you think of a famous person who may be an activist? If you could type your answers into chat. Richard Branson? Sir Richard Branson. Good save, Martin. You nearly lost your bonus point there. And Shelley's thinking of one. What about a Premiership footballer? Could be. Who are you thinking of? Can't think of a name. That's okay, Shelley. And Martin's got Anton Deck. So Martin, just talk to me on the mic. Why have you said Anton Deck there?
Well, if you look at how they work,
Yeah.
seem to be full of beans, jumping around,
Mm-hmm.
trying out new things.
Yeah.
They don't hold back in talking. They like to be surrounded by people.
Mm-hmm.
They do become very engaging, and just as a can-do attitude, really.
Lovely. Yep, so good examples there. One I thought of when I was putting this together was possibly Chris Evans. Having read his autobiography, he seems to just jump in and do what he feels like doing and enjoys the here and now. Always seems to be willing to have a go at things. Okay. Shelley's got Gordon Ramsay. Yep, nice one, Shelley. So, if you can give me a green tick if you're ready to move on. But yeah, Gordon Ramsay's not a Premiership footballer, and Wayne Rooney is. Good knowledge of football there, guys. Thanks. Shelley's ready to move on, so is Martin. So what I'm going to do now, rather than go through the next bit of the teach, I'm just going to show you how the slides would build from there, and then we'll do some more activities a bit later on. So then what I went on into this session was explain how reflectors like to learn, and then there's an activity about what behaviours might a reflector display in a group. And to get people's thoughts here, I went back and used the same technique as earlier, as using the sort of swim lane whiteboard. So I would be asking Martin and Shelley to select a lane and put in some of their thoughts around the behaviours that we could then go on to discuss. But Shelley and Martin, as we've used this type of interaction before, I'm just going to move on. I then explain pragmatists, explain what they like to do, and then again, as before, typing answers into chat, think of famous people who might be a pragmatist, and then I've put my answer in. Lord Sugar. And finally a theorist. What they like to do, and then back to the behaviours a theorist might display in a group. Back to swim lanes, etc, etc. And now that they've all been explained, I then put in another activity for people to make a decision on which learning style they think they are. Now, as the facilitator, I've got here a copy of my PowerPoint presentation with notes on. Ideally, if you can, try and log on to a dual screen machine so you can open PowerPoint separately and work from two screens. I'm having to thumb through my notes here, and I use that as a bit of a filler then to find out what slide I was on. So what I've got now is another activity which is deciding which learning style that you have. So based on the explanations that we had and what you know about learning styles, Martin, you've already told me you're an activist. So Shelley, what type of learning style would you say you have?
I think I'm a pragmatist.
A pragmatist. So why would you think that?
Well, because I think I've trained myself to be a pragmatist. So historically, I might have been more of an activist. I think I'm a pragmatist. First, jump in, think later.
Yeah. That's
and had fingers and toes. Well, I think I've trained myself. So learned from that. So historically, I might have been more of an activist. Feet first. I think it depends what situation you're in. Sorry, Adi.
No, carry on.
Had fingers and toes. Because if it's something I'm quite intrigued about and retrained myself, I probably would be more of an activist. I think it depends what situation you're in. But if I know it's something that I've got to be a bit cautious about, because if it's I'll be a bit something more pragmatic. I'm quite intrigued about.
Speaking to activists that
I probably would be more of an activist.
That are maturing in age.
But if I know it's something that I've got to
without offending anybody,
be a bit cautious about, I'll be a bit more pragmatic.
Pragmatists, as they have more birthdays. That's what I've found in my experience.
So what are you saying, Adi?
I'm saying that you're probably still very much an activist, Shelley, because you're really young. Did I get a bonus point?
Yes.
Lovely, thanks. So Martin, why would you say you're an activist? Are you there?
Because of all the things you described on your first slide.
Yes.
I do tend to jump in thinking sometimes.
Right. Okay.
And I always try something new.
Yeah. Yeah. You always
too long. Is something I don't like.
Yeah. Okay. So you've both worked with me for a couple of years now. What would you say I am? So Shelley, you first. What would you say I am?
Sometimes you're a theorist.
Yeah.
Because you have to know why.
I do. This is true.
And then sometimes you reflector.
Yeah.
You are a reflector.
I am. Probably too much sometimes.
Sometimes you're a theorist. Well, it balances, Martin. You have to know why.
Someone's got to. Martin, what would you say I am?
And then sometimes you reflect.
Besides annoying.
Besides annoying, yeah.
You are a reflector.
I think at Shelley's stage, quite a theorist.
Yeah.
You like to get down in the detail and find out how things work.
Yeah.
Degree sometimes.
Yeah.
And did you reflect on things afterwards? Our course when you reflect on how you came across and what you covered.
This is true. Lovely, and I would agree with you. I think I am a theorist and a reflector. Okay, so back onto our key points. So that's what we've already discussed about facilitating online learning sessions. And in that last bit, we did some more interactions there. We had some exercises we went through that I described as we went through. Try and have an interaction every 3 slides if possible. It keeps people listening and engaged. Vary the types of interactions you have, so use chat, use talking, use whiteboards. And if your students are putting things into chat and things like that, thank them, value them for their contributions. I'm just looking at chat now. Shelley needs to train Martin on how to be more pragmatic, and are you saying I'm old? I don't know if that's directed at me, but I would never say that, Martin. And so at the end we have a slide that says that concludes our look at learning styles. Now you might see that the word styles has popped down and is obscured by the image. When preparing your slides, it's worth preparing to see how they'll look on the live, because on PowerPoint that word styles appears after the word learning in one long line. So clearly I've done that just to illustrate the point there. And like every good session, whether it be online or in the classroom, we need to go back and cover our objectives, let people know what we have covered. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to ask Shelley to name 2 learning style theories. So think back to the exercise where you did the word search.
Vac.
Yes.
And Honey and Mumford.
Fantastic, thank you. Martin, can you list 2 of the learning styles that we talked about in Honey and Mumford?
Activist and reflector.
Activist and reflector, that's great. Shelley, can you name the other 2? Round of applause from Shelley.
Theorist and pragmatist.
Theorist and pragmatist, fantastic. And you've both identified your own learning style. So I think we can safely say objectives have been achieved. Before we move on, do you have any final questions on the content?
No, thank you, AD.
Thanks, Shelley. Martin?
No thanks, lady.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much for your participation and your contributions today. It's important to do that as an online facilitator, just as you would in the classroom.
Thank you, AD.
And then give people some places they can get further information from. So Business Balls is a website where you can use more scientific ways of identifying your learning styles. And Peter Honey, who was the Honey part of the Honey and Mumford that developed that theory, has his own website, and you can visit more for further research there. So during that session I did the any questions the wrong way round, but people can raise their hand if they've got a final question to answer. Shelley, you've got your hand raised, so please go ahead.
I just have one question.
Yep.
You've mentioned a couple of times about having 2 screens or 2 systems.
Yes.
So that you can follow your notes.
Yep.
And respond to any kind of private questions that your students might have. I just have one question. You've mentioned a couple of times about having 2 with your other students if you were responding on the phone, follow your notes to an email from a student, and
it depends on
to any kind of private
what the query was.
That your students
if it was
might have.
An email, I would hope it would be very short. I would only deal with it if I could deal with it and
with your other
not
students
have to interrupt the session.
If you were responding
so if
on
I
the
set
phone
somebody like a task to do, so the whiteboard task where people are typing in behaviours or thinking of people that they thought were a pragmatist, for example, and put it in chat, that might enable me to do a quick reply via email. I wouldn't necessarily expect to get phone calls unless it's because people have had a systems failure, not because they've got a question about the content. But I would assess what the issue is, and I'd make a decision on whether I could respond then or whether it would have to wait till later.
Okay, thanks.
Does that answer that?
Yes, thanks.
Okay, thanks. And Martin, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, thanks for such AD. Very professional. They're well delivered.
Thank you.
I have a question really about is it worth rehearsing presentation before doing it live on the system?
Yes, it's definitely worth rehearsing. One of the benefits of online facilitation is you can pretty much do a script about what you want to cover. The interactive bits obviously go where they go, but with your slide deck you can have your notes about what you want to say about each particular point as you go through, and you can rehearse that for as long as you have available to get it slick. So yes, I would definitely recommend that.
Thanks, Aidy.
Okay.
One more question.
Yeah, go on.
Are you able to record a session with just you talking slides rather than have learners attending?
Yes, you can. So you could record it using the NCount Live software, record it, and then you could publish it to Moodle, for example, so people could download it and watch it at a later date. Clearly, you wouldn't have the interaction with people. It would be a presentation rather than an interactive training session.
Thanks. That's worth knowing.
Okay.
Thanks, Aidy.
You're welcome. Any final questions? If not, if you could clear any emoticons you've got currently displayed. That's great. So as one final round off the online session, we've covered reception slides, using the various tools, audio issues, the importance of an introductory exercise, the chance to give people to talk to you about their concerns, and then covering the aims and objectives, introducing more tools, the importance of images, the considerations of copyright, and to get interactions from your participants every 3 slides, using different ways for them to interact and thank them for their participation. And finally, we said summarise the session and the key points. Show them where people can get further info from. Thank you participants for attending. So thanks Martin and Shelley for giving up the time this morning. And then say that you'll stay online for 3 or 4 minutes afterwards should people have questions that they want to ask you outside of that learning environment. So Martin and Shelley, normally I would stay online now, but I'm going to close the session off there, and I hope you enjoyed it.
Thanks, Aidy.
Thanks Martin.
Thank you, AD.
Thanks Shelley.